again, everyone. Um, this is actually time number 3 recording this. Cricket has decided that the plow truck is her mortal enemy for today. So we're going to try this again. I'm back with a less squeaky chair, hopefully. So sorry about that. Today we're going to be talking about Kieran Khang Yeo. And there's going to be a couple spoilers for late in the first book, After the Cure, obviously for Kieran Khang Yeo, and also a little bit for The Infected, which is the second book in the second series. But only the beginning scenes. It's not really going to spoil any more than that. We're gonna talk about the Cure camps a little bit. So, in case you didn't know, Kieran Khang Yeo is a short story I wrote for the anthology The Z Chronicles, which is a very good anthology for in case you're craving uh, anything zombie, post-apocalyptic related. Most of the stories in there are not your typical super action-packed, fast zombies stories. Most of them have a different take on the zombie genre, and I really like it. There are a few, just fun ones. My favorite's by Will Swordstrom, and it's about a football player named Jelly Roll, which I loved. But anyway, I really recommend that book, not just for, Kieran Khang Yeo, obviously, but for all the other books. Like, if you just need some zombie shorts, um, they're really good ones, and I will put a link to it in the comments below in case you've never seen that book before. Anyhow, when I wrote Kieran Khang Yeo, I wanted to explore something that happened late in After the Cure. So, when Nella visits Frank for the first time at his house, it really starts to sink in that the cured do not live the same life as most of the immunes do, by design. Like the city enforces that. So she doesn't really, like, she kind of intellectually knows it before then, but it doesn't hit her because she spends so much time out of the city until just before the book starts. Basically, she is kind of out in the cure camps um, for most of it, whether she's like actually treating people or is like specializing in follow-up care. Anyhow, it really starts to sink in that Frank really is treated like a second-class citizen of the city, and she tells him this story because she wants him to know that no matter what the city itself or the immunes try to claim, that he should not feel like a second class citizen because the the immunes are not any more innocent of violence than the infected were. And granted, she should probably do this less awkwardly. She tells him something terrible about herself rather than awesome things about him, but she spends most of the book, telling him wonderful things about himself. So, this is just a different tactic. Anyhow, she tells a story about how her supervisor, kind of because of the mental strain of camp after camp, loses it. He decides that the infected and the immunes are better off if they don't cure them at all, if they don't wake up from the cure. So he goes and shoots an entire tent full of people who are sedated from the cure dart. Um, so I wanted to kind of explore what would have made that happen. So for Kieran Khang Yeo, it's not from the supervisor's point of view. It's from this man who had been infected and was waking up in the cured camp, coming to grips with what had happened and what he'd done, and dealing with this supervisor. Anyhow, Khang Yeo is he's a bus driver. He has two grown children, and he becomes infected. And when he wakes up, the only piece of clothing that remains on him, because he's been exposed and had things, torn his clothing and soiled his clothing and been rained on and etc. for months and months and months, the only thing that's left is this cuff of his sleeve where his daughter, the day he succumbed to the illness, she had come to visit him and she sewed a button back on his work shirt for him. So that's the only piece of clothing that he has that remains. So that's what this is. Kang Yao's button from Gia. So that's the other part of what I wanted to talk about was the cure camps. So you find out in after the cure that when Frank was in the cure camps, he was given a duffel bag, and it had everything he was found with, along with a scavenged set of clothing and survival items and things. So this was Kang Yao's only possession was this button, so that would have been in his duffel bag if he had taken one. Anyhow, so I wanted to talk about how the early cure camps kind of worked because it would have evolved over time. So not the very first one, that's a special case, and we'll get into that a little bit later as a hint. But the early days of the cure camps, what would have probably happened is the immunes would have, after they'd sedated everyone, tried to take care of them, tried to clean them up, fix some of their wounds while they were sedated, that kind of thing, just to make them more comfortable. It's a very human instinct to try and make other people more comfortable and ease their suffering. So the problem with that is that if you've been through a trauma or like a terrible crime or something, sometimes erasing the evidence of what you've been through can make it feel like unreal, like a dream, like something that didn't really happen or wasn't as bad as you remember it being. So I think that partway through, a lot of that would have changed. So by the time Frank or Kang Yeo were waking up, they wouldn't have cleaned them up because it would have caused so many like mental health problems in accepting their reality. They probably would have stabilized them, like fixed any wounds, that kind of thing, but maybe not washed them. Same with Neil. That's why he wakes up filthy and, his mouth tastes terrible and his hair is all matted, because if they had fixed all those things while he was asleep, it would seem less real to him. And the cured already have memory problems and processing problems because of the illness and because of the trauma. So you would want them to have, at least temporarily, a little taste of what their body was like when they woke up. So that's why Kang Yeo even had the button. That's why he even was had dirt and things on him, was because he was left in this state to wake up so he could come to terms. The other part that I wanted to talk about was the year being '02. As you can see here, August '02. So, I had a reader. This is going to go into the 40th day, just a little tiny bit. There's a scene in the 40th day where, on the side of a van, Frank writes '08. And I had a reader contact me a year or two after I published the 40th day and asked me, "Oh, is this supposed to have happened in 2008?" And I said, "No, um, but I couldn't remember because it had been so long why I had put '08." And luckily, I keep notebooks of everything because as soon as I write something, it's like out of my head. Anyhow, so when I went back and looked at the notebooks, it was because I wanted to talk about the calendar, this being such a huge event where 90% of the known world in these books is gone. Um, I want it to be such a large event that they would have reordered the calendar around it. That the plague would have been year zero of this new era. And when I gave that reader the answer, I kind of thought, geez, Deirdre, this seems kind of over the top. Maybe we should go back and edit that and change it a little bit. But I didn't. I kept it there because I thought, it is a massive change. Maybe it wouldn't, quite be that badly, but I left it in. And then, fast forward several years, we've gone through COVID, and I no longer think so much that it's over the top or silly that it would be such a change. And it's going to be a theme in the thing that's coming up, but um, we if your conversations with your friends and family have been anything like mine, um, we've reordered a lot of how we live around COVID. If you listen to people, they'll say, well, since COVID or because of COVID, the things like the way we work, the way we shop, the way we raise our kids has all changed in multiple ways. Even, social media and how we exist online has changed because of a pandemic. So I no longer think it's such an over the top idea that the calendar would be reordered because of an event like that, where we're talking much larger than COVID, obviously, for the December plague. But I wanted to keep that in there as there was a completely separate life before the December plague and now after. And maybe other people would date it from before the cure, and then after the cure would be their year zero. But anyway, that's where the '02 and that in the 40th day, the '08 come from. Um, that's why those numbers are there. It was not meant for an existing date already. Anyhow, I hope you liked hearing about Khang Yeo. I will leave a link for the Z Chronicles. Again, not for curing Khang Yeo, but all the other zombie stories in that book I think are great. And tomorrow we will talk about the actual infection. So I will see you tomorrow for some antibiotic talk and some bacteria talk. All right, bye.